Hi, I'm Jody Vantac of Vantac International. Today we're going to do a little bit of a video talking about potential carjacking. And in this particular scenario, as I left the vehicle, we're thinking that there's a ruse where there's somebody on the side of the road. They try to flag down a vehicle like they need help. They may have other assailants, or the person here that the camera's indicating has a weapon system. Now recognize, as I approached, I had my hands in my pockets. Most people who have watched our page probably recognize why. And that is because in my pocket I have a hammerless revolver. This gun will shoot flawlessly until it's empty if I have an assailant that's close by. Now, if something like that's going to happen, if I were to encounter somebody who drew a gun on me, we're probably going to be in a quick gun battle. And what I talk about all the time is a force multiplier. And what is that? A force multiplier is friends or family that are versed in tactics, have a plan, and are armed with firearms. So what I do here is, you saw when I get out of the truck, my force multiplier, which is my family, my wife and my son, are armed in the vehicle and they're watching what's happening. Now if I get engaged in a gun battle, or if I give a signal like rubbing my head, kind of like this, then you can see that my wife now has a rifle and can engage the target, whether I'm shooting or whether I just fall to the ground or roll out of the way. Again, this is for a ruse where somebody's trying to stop you on the roadway. Now, along with that happening, I'm going to pick the camera up and move it. My son is also, from the back of the vehicle, covering the 3 o'clock and the 6 o'clock, because in this particular scenario, we're thinking that from the 6 all the way up to the 12 is a safe zone. So maybe it's a wide open field or it's a drop down canyon. It's where nobody's going to come from. So my son is protecting the flank, while my wife is engaging a target up front and protecting me. Now, in talking about that, let's talk a couple of basic things. Now, this is actually reference to a gentleman in South Africa who says they're having a lot of carjackings there. Now, I don't know the laws in South Africa. The laws change all over the United States. Here in Montana, which I recognize as America, laws are pretty pro-gun. The bottom line is this: carrying the gun in the car, if you can do it, accessibility. You've got to be able to get to that gun when you need it, meaning that if it's in a holster or in a bag and you can't get to it and somebody gets on top of you, it's not going to work. So what do we want to do? We want to cut down on the chances of something bad happening. So do you know that violent crime goes up about 60% in the dark? So try not to go places in the dark. And if there's bad sides of a city or a town where you probably shouldn't go, don't go there, drive around it. Now there are people that believe, hey, you know what, I've got the right, I can drive through there, and they take that risk. You have to recognize it's the same thing as an 85-year-old widow who's lived in the same house for 50 years, and when the neighborhood goes to pot with crime, she says, I'm not moving because I have the right to live here and I've lived here all my life. Soon after, she's raped and murdered, and that's an awful thing, but you have to recognize that to live a safe life, you have to use your brain, and you have to recognize that the best way to keep out of danger is to avoid it altogether. Those things being said, weapon accessibility, safe places to go, and having team multiplier is important. Now, if you're even in a more of a violent scenario, of course this is a rural environment, right? This isn't really going to happen in the city. When we think about being in the city with a vehicle, even with a force multiplier, is if people can be armed, they should be. The person in the back should always be watching the back. The windows should be up, and that's because that's going to eliminate people who really don't have weapons that can hurt you from outside, like a knife or a stick. Now recognize from prior videos, if you get into a gun battle, being in the vehicle is a death zone, and shooting out the window, though you may hit something, is going to really work against you because bullets coming in are going to throw glass all over you, and their rounds are going to be accurate when yours aren't. So if you get into an ensued gun battle where you can't drive off, you need to get out of that vehicle and fight. If you are in traffic, that's another thing, is where you are driving in traffic. I would usually stay towards the center lane, and why is that? Because there's usually no barrier there. So if you stop your car, you should always stop your car or your truck at least one car length behind the vehicle in front of you. Now, if they're part of something that's going to attack you, they're going to have to throw their car in reverse or jump out of the car, and that's going to give you time, if you're alert, to drive away. The greatest vehicle you have in your arsenal right away is your vehicle, your 5,000 or 6,000 pound vehicle. That will plow through things, get away, and will also provide some type of cover while you escape. before you let somebody approach and take your whole family hostage with a weapon system. So I would stay in the center, unless you have some kind of center barrier that has about a 3-foot tall concrete barrier. Then I'm not going to be driving in that lane. I'm going to be over on the right-hand side. Even if there's a sidewalk, as long as I can get over it, that's why we drive taller vehicles like trucks, I can at least jump that curb and get away if something goes wrong. So being aware, keeping at least one vehicle distance every time you stop, watching your surroundings, windows up. Remember, even though shooting through glass, a round can be deflected, if somebody's within a foot of the glass, there's not a problem firing through the glass with your firearm, but it has to be accessible, and that's important. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the camera, so it's going to break for a second, and I'm going to show you kind of what is going on back there. Here you can see the different fields of fire. Ginger's watching the front of the truck, which we're calling the 12 o'clock. She's engaging the assailants or putting out covering fire. And Wyatt, of course, is watching the flank, 6 o'clock, the rear of the truck. Both of them have rifles, superior firepower for most of the encounters we may engage. And that's how teams should work together. The bottom line is, if you're caught in a carjacking, the best way to survive that is to have a plan. A plan is better than no plan at all. Communication is key to success, whether it's business or survival. If you have people in a vehicle, you should all train together. If you carry firearms, you should train together in the use of those firearms. And then you can even make plans in a vehicle at the range and say, these are your areas of responsibility. Communicate with one another to see if you see threats and who you need to engage and what to do. Remember, if you engage from the vehicle, vehicles are a death trap, but they could also get you out of the area. If you can, the best thing to do is be in a vehicle and flee the scene. But if you're stuck in a vehicle, there are parts like the engine that will stop bullets, the other parts not so much. You know how to engage the enemy, and you know how to work together with your team. That puts you way ahead. The other part is, if you're going into a violent area, having 2 vehicles is a great thing. That way, if one vehicle is incapacitated, you've got another vehicle that can get everybody out. If the first vehicle or the second vehicle is knocked out, as long as that vehicle is put in neutral, the other vehicle can be used to push that vehicle out of the ambush zone. To survive an ambush, you have an 80% chance of survival if you get out of it. That means an 80% chance of being killed if you stay in it. Remember those statistics. Work as a team, train together and make a plan, and you're going to have a lot better chance of surviving anything like a carjacking. From us to all of you around the world, thanks so much for the support, and keep safe.